Hello there, and welcome to Better Than This. This is a show for ambitious humans who are tired of the status quo playbook and are looking for something better. My name is Meghan French Dunbar, and I've spent the last decade exploring what it would take to improve work for everyone, to discover whether or not it's possible to succeed in business without being forced to sacrifice ourselves, without the chronic stress, the burnout, guilt, overwhelm, the anxiety. Good news, it is. As an author, entrepreneur, journalist, and resident instigator, I've interviewed over 1,000 extraordinary business leaders who've achieved success by throwing the old playbook out the window and doing everything differently. What's even better is that this new playbook improves your performance, your workplace, and your life. If you're ready to admit that the way we're working isn't working and are looking for something better than this, you're in the right place. Let's get started. What do you think about when I ask you about the word success? How would you define success for yourself? What comes to mind? What goals, aspirations, accomplishments? So here is the thing about success. Subconsciously or not, whether you are very clear on what your definition of success is, or it floats in the back of your brain, my guess is there's some aspect of achievement, awards, titles, some sort of pinnacle of your career that you're aiming for. And the thing that sometimes we don't realize about success is how consequential this concept is. How you define success dictates many, if not all, of the decisions that you make in your life. What work you do, what compromises you're going to make, what you spend the most of your time on, all of your energy, your wisdom, your insights, what your passion, all of it goes toward what you think of as success. For most of us, we don't consciously really think about success. It's just kind of something that's been handed to us, that we've been conditioned, usually from a young age, to imagine that it equates with some sort of idea of achievement, accomplishment, setting goals, winning the awards, being the best in the class. And in this episode, we're going to talk about why that concept of success actually sets you up for failure. It does not lead to long-term contentment, and it does not track with the current elements that we know that help humans flourish. So we're going to talk today about what the old playbook of ambition and success looks like and why it's failing so many of us. We're going to talk about what the new playbook of ambition looks like, rooted in values, well-being, and flourishing. And then we're going to get into bringing this to life in your own life by going through key practices to actually start reorienting the way that you are thinking about success from one that is rooted in never being actually content or happy or satisfied to one that actually leads to long-term thriving and flourishing. So let's get into it. To bring the old playbook to life, I'm going to give you a little peek into my psyche as a child. So we're going to go all the way back. It's 1992, Bergen Elementary, and it is Field Day, the annual competition where there are extraordinary feats of agility, like the three-legged race, running while balancing an egg on a spoon, running while balancing like a hula hoop next to you, and I might as well be a baby William Wallace from Braveheart, donning a child-sized kilt and war paint as I head into Field Day. It is my favorite day of the year. Why? Because I dominate. I am that absolute dick of a child who takes Field Day way too seriously and wants to win every single competition. And I do. I have grown up with an older brother who's 4 years older than me, and so everything in my life revolves around winning and competing and being the best and trying to prove myself. And so I get all of my blue ribbons from Field Day, as I did the year before and as I'll do the next year as well, and I take them home, and I have this little box under my bed where I keep all my little blue ribbons in it, and I pull it out and I add my blue ribbons in, and I might as well be Scrooge McDuck, like laying on my bed of coins, but instead mine is my bed of blue ribbons that all tell me something about myself, which is I am a good girl. I am the best. I have proven myself. I am worthy of love, right? Because that's what achievement means, that we are worthy of love. That's what we tie our self-worth to. And I've already done this. By the age of 8, I have just indoctrinated my brain to believe that everything is about winning and achieving, proving myself, being the best. And this is the pattern that sticks with me for the rest of my life. We go into high school where I'm competing to be top of my class. I'm the captain of the soccer team. I'm the captain of the basketball team. Everything is so that I can get into the best school. So then I get into school and then I'm on the dean's list in college. I'm getting 2 degrees in 4.5 years. I'm proving. It's constantly proving. And then I'm getting my first entry-level career position at the Environmental Defense Fund, where I'm an assistant, where my goal is to get to the associate level. And then I really want to get to the director. Everything is promotion, goal, next achievement, salary, title. It's all this linear path to success. I did my MBA. I launched a company. We sold the company, keynote speaker. All of the ways in which I ever imagined that I am going to succeed have really come to fruition. And my ego feels good. I'm getting standing ovations, and everything about my life is just rooted in how successful I am by all the external achievements I can show off to everyone. And then COVID hits. So I had my son, my first child, in the summer of 2019. And at this point, I'd been leading my company for nearly 5 years. And when I got back from maternity leave, I was just terribly burnt out. I had no gas left in my tank. And I remember coming back and thinking, I am not the leader that my team needs. They deserve something better. Can barely get out of bed. I'm exhausted to the core of my being. I mean, I have a newborn. There's all the newborn parent stuff as well, on top of years of just overextending, overworking myself. I'm just going to get us through our big event, which is the 2020 World Changing Women Summit, January. And I get us through this and I resign on February 1st. And on March 13th was my last day. March 17th, we were in global lockdown. I went from being the CEO, being on stage, hosting events with hundreds of people, having this name for myself in my professional community, giving keynote presentations to leaders twice my age, being invited to exclusive events. It was like this very externally motivating career that I had, to COVID. So instead of launching the next venture, which I was planning on, of course, resigning and then immediately going into the next thing, I am a full-time mom now, and I have ADHD. I am a creative spirit. My therapist once called me a business artist. I did not ever imagine being a full-time mom, and I am a fantastic mom. I have a little bit too much entrepreneurial pizzazz to be a full-time mom, and there's a lot of reasons for this, but month after month go by, and I start slipping further and further into a pretty sincere depression. And I had been contending with burnout and chronic stress before this and low-level depression, but this started to become significant depression. Having crippling fear-based thoughts about my son getting hurt when we would be out on the playground, snapping at my partner. Everything was wrong, and I was catastrophizing, saying things to my husband like, I'm a childhood movie star who has peaked too soon in my career and will always look back at that career that I had and be resentful of the fact that I will never have success again like that. And I've ruined my career. My career is over. I'm never going to get back into it. I'm just catastrophizing. Everything is the end of the world. I finally see a therapist. Only took 5 to 6 months of this for me to be like, okay, finally I'm ready to see a therapist. And first session, she's like, you're clinically depressed, which, yes, I think I knew that. And as we start going through session after session, we really get into the heart of the fact that I have nothing to attach my self-worth to. In the absence of achievement, in the absence of having an outlet to achieve, to be seen, to be validated, to be awarded by my peers, I don't know how to value myself. I feel entirely worthless without some outlet to be productive, some sort of tangible thing that I can show to everyone around me about how worthy I am. I didn't have my blue ribbons. And so she helps me unpack this all the way back to childhood to now, around 30 plus years of this conditioning that the only way that I feel worthy of love is to achieve. And fortunately, I understood I was not alone in this. I had met many other professional women who were in the same boat. For example, I met Elaine Dinos. This was her story about making it to the top at a global consulting firm.
So when I joined, I quickly prided myself on, being all things to all people. It was a services oriented environment. And I think this is true in a lot of services oriented environments where the customer is most important, right? And servicing the customer. And I noticed this in my organization, but many others where you are not rewarded to take care of yourself. You're rewarded to sacrifice. It's like there's a lot of like self-sacrifice motivation so that you give everything to the client. Just metrics for success all being externally validated. How much productivity, how much compensation, how hard you're working, how late you're staying. Being rewarded for my productivity felt good. It felt like self-worth. I think as a woman, how we're measured success and how we are validated was always challenging for me. And so when I was in the work environment where I could just put on an androgynous suit and focus on my productivity, felt rewarding in a way and made me feel like I was seen in a way that I probably hadn't felt seen. As I've kind of unpacked the 12 years I spent in this environment, I realized that a lack of self-worth and a needing to prove myself was really generating a lot of that, and just not having good boundaries in place so that I gave so much of myself. I was the busiest of the busiest, and we would walk by each other in the hallways and people would say, "How are you?" And I'd say, "Busy." Oh, so busy. And that was like, I'm doing great if I'm busy. Like, what is that? And that's not how you are. That's like a, hey, don't talk to me. That's like a wall up, right? And so I was really busy and I did really well there. I climbed the ranks. I was a top performer during the downturn of 2008. They let like 2/3 of the staff go, and I got promoted and took on double the work. And I was really proud of that. Like, I mean, it was like already being overworked and then just more extraction. And that's just, I think, how it's like the treadmill just goes faster and faster, and just more and more pressure. And I had one child and I just kind of replaced my social life for baby things, but I kept giving everything to my employer, and I got rewarded for that. I got promoted, I got more money, and that was really great until I had my second child. And that was when kind of the rubber met the road and revealed all the cracks in the foundation. The work that I had built for myself and the life that I was longing for were not compatible. I think that until that kind of breaking point for me, which was now like 9 years ago. That breaking point for me was when I started to look at what were my sources of satisfaction and happiness and success. There was just a lot of disconnection and compartmentalizing. Happiness can feel like a thin layer of varnish. I was happy going out to lunches and having happy hours and getting flown to New York with partners and staying in nice hotels. And I was happy calling C-suite leaders and having conversations with chief executives and some of the brands that I admired most. I think I got a lot of ego gratification. And so I wasn't joyful. I wasn't whole. It was filling a void, a lack of self-worth, a lack of believing in myself, a lack of believing that I'm enough. It comes down to like feeling and believing that we are whole as we are. And I think, now looking back on it, it was a very superficial version of happy. It wasn't joy. Happiness from compensation and title and who I knew was a very thin house of cards.
Elaine's story, my story, and many of the stories that I've heard, maybe your story, align with what I call the old playbook of social success. Social success is rooted in the one societal script that we're all handed as we come out of the womb, that your job is to do the best, to be the best in school, to set yourself apart so you can get into a better school, a big name school, do the best there so you can get a good job at a big name place, make the most amount of money, climb the corporate ranks so you get the big fancy titles, so you get influence, power, do all of this, set aside anything that is about passion or purpose or things that make you excited. You need a practical, stable, well-regarded career. You make it to the top, age 60-ish, then you can maybe retire as long as you've saved enough money. And at that point, maybe you can start pursuing the things that you actually enjoy in life. That's the script, supposed to work for everyone, and that's what leads to happiness. And the entire time along the way, you're climbing this linear ladder that is entirely based on extrinsic validations, motivation to participate in something based on meeting some sort of external goal, garnering praise, approval, winning a competition, receiving award, receiving payment, influence, power. Extrinsic motivation is not driven by the desire to engage in an activity for its own sake. It is all about appearances and helping to show how worthy you are based on some sort of societal script. This comes from a lot of different places. It might be from your family, your peers. Now with social media, there's all sorts of ways in which we're just conditioned to see this as the only path to pursue. And this especially becomes a narrative for people who are trying to meet their expectations. We see this a lot in immigrant families. So this was Alpha Demelash's experience being an Ethiopian refugee to the United States and her family's pressure.
That's where a lot of times the expectation begins, is in your home life, and you go to Harvard, and definitely the expectations were there that, oh, thank goodness, like this is happening. Not only is the family liberated because Alpha's going to graduate Harvard, go do investment banking, and financial woes for everybody. It's over. It's like, you get a car, like us, what's
Just Oprah.
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. And like regional economic development plans right on your desk where you're like, I'm not quite sure what's happening here. It's like, is this the investment thesis for the entire nation? Okay. You're like, okay. So it's definitely, and I will say that when I did graduate, there was that pressure. My parents are like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm investigating where the pockets of economic poverty and othering are around me. And they're like, to do what? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And they're like, you can't possibly be trying to like get into the neighborhoods that all of us are trying to like make sure to escape. So there was pressure. And 6 months in, I did take a job at Bear Stearns, which is no longer with us, but I lasted like 3 days. I walked out. I definitely was like, no. I just felt like, when you're in the wrong place entirely. Like every part of my being knew I was in the wrong place. I was spending more time in the bathroom at Bear Stearns than at the cubicle, having a conversation at the mirror with myself saying, why are you here? What happened? What went so awfully wrong that you are choosing to self-incarcerate in this way? It felt like a self-incarceration, that I was opting away from the people, the communities where I knew life, where I knew what is real, what like deeply at a heart level moved me, helped me make decisions about how to show up, when to show up, where to be. And I was like, all of a sudden, all dressed up, putting on makeup and putting my heels on and walking through these doors into this giant black building and like not coming out until the sun is down. I'm like, what happened? Who forced you? And I couldn't answer that question other than I just want to prove to my parents that I'm not being foolish or disregarding the role that economics and money play, and that I'm definitely committed to making sure I can be self-sufficient and pay my rent. And like, I don't want them to think I was just like, and we're not wealthy and I'm not wealthy. So I wanted to honor their concerns and show them that I am listening to them and not just disregarding them and being foolish. But it was so egregious at a soul level that I was willing to do anything else. But that's so I knew I knew the path would have to be defined differently.
Alpha story, Elaine's story, my story. I hope if you're starting to see some of yourself in these stories as well, you know that you're not alone. So there were 3 things that really shifted my mindset about extrinsic motivation and how I was thinking about success. And that's what we're going to get into now, hoping that these are helpful for you as well. So the first is that extrinsic motivation is addicting. This was research done by Brian Knutson. He was researching the impact of anticipating a reward, i.e., extrinsic motivation, on the brain. And he discovered the burst of dopamine that surges to your brain when someone anticipates a reward is the same physiological response that those with substance disorders experience when they are about to have access to the substance that they are addicted to. It follows the same script as addiction. Think about it. Think about the last time you achieved the big goal that you had set out for yourself, whether it be a sales target or a revenue goal or a promotion or a new title or a new role. You celebrate, maybe you go out to dinner with your family, have a little champagne or whatever you do, and maybe you feel good for a week. Maybe you feel good for a month. But then what happens? You need the next thing. You need the next goal. And it needs to be bigger and better than the one you just achieved. You need the next promotion. Okay, so now I'm a senior vice president. What's next? You just constantly are on this hamster wheel, and there's never an end point. There's never enough. It is a perpetual cycle of kind of somewhat contentment and then disappointment, and you need the next thing. And especially if you don't have line of sight toward the next thing, you feel entirely lost. So this is the first realization I had, was like, oh, this is addictive behavior, which is usually not considered healthy. So this is one way that I started divorcing myself from having my kitty claws gripped into the extrinsic motivation hamster wheel. So beyond addiction, the second mindset shift that happened for me was when I started to realize that research proves that extrinsic motivation is not particularly satisfying. On the other hand, intrinsic motivation, doing things for inherent satisfaction, is. It leads to longer term, longer lasting satisfaction and contentment. This was research done by psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. So they explored quality of life for college students, 2 sets. Set A based their entire idea of success on extrinsic motivation. Their post-college goals were based on title, salary, influence, power, all of those things. Group B, they all had intrinsically motivated ideas of success based on impact, growth, the ways in which they wanted to evolve as humans. So they studied these 2 groups post-college, and a lot of them achieved the levels of success that they were pursuing while they were imagining them in college. So Group A, our extrinsically motivated group, they found post-college that regardless of the level of success that they had hit or how many goals that they had achieved, this group had the same level of life satisfaction as they did in college and increased levels of anxiety and depression. Group B, on the other hand, our intrinsically motivated group, again, regardless of like the level of success that they had hit post-college, they had increased levels of life satisfaction as compared to when they were in college and decreased levels of anxiety and depression. This interesting point here. Okay, so it's addictive. It actually doesn't lead to longer lasting satisfaction. In the researcher Deci's words, even though our culture puts a strong emphasis on attaining wealth and fame, pursuing these goals does not contribute to having a satisfying life. The things that make your life happy are growing as an individual, having loving relationships, and contributing to your community. So, mindset shift number 2, like, okay, so intrinsic motivation is like the pathway toward longer lasting contentment and satisfaction and decreased anxiety and depression. Cool, cool. And then mindset shift number 3, on the back of DC's words here about what actually leads to longer lasting contentment, was when I was looking at the research about what are the key elements of human flourishing and what are key intrinsic motivators. So this was actually, Harvard has a human flourishing program where they've been studying what are the key elements that actually lead to human flourishing. They identified 5 markers that across the board result in humans feeling like they're flourishing. 1 is happiness and feeling some sort of life satisfaction. 2, mental and physical health and well-being. 3, having meaning and purpose. 4, character and virtue, feeling aligned with your values. And 5, having close social relationships. So these are the 5 markers of human flourishing. And when we talk about intrinsic motivation, this was Daniel Pink in his book Drive identified 3 key drivers of intrinsic motivation, one being purpose and meaning, which is one of the key elements of human flourishing, growth and mastery, which he identified as getting better and better at something that is meaningful to you. And then the third is autonomy, having freedom and voice and choice. And so when I really started imagining these things as, okay, these are the things that bring us true human flourishing, how many of these do we actually equate with success or build into our particular definitions of success? How many of our goals or our professional aspirations have anything to do with these markers of human flourishing? For me, when I started really getting into this, I would say it was very little. Does that track with your experience as well? Not even being aware or conscious of the key elements of human flourishing or what brings us intrinsic motivation as part of your definition of success? I don't know many people who that is the case with, right? Because none of us have really been conditioned this way. And if none of us are basing our ideas of success around what brings us true human flourishing or deep inherent sense of satisfaction, and we know that extrinsic motivation doesn't make us happy in the long run and it's addicting, maybe we can start to understand why many high achievers aren't happy or feel like something's missing or feel like they're doing it wrong or like someone else knows something that they don't. I mean, that's how I felt, was like, wait a second, I have done everything right. I've done all the things and I'm not particularly happy. I'm actually really stressed out, anxious, bordering on depressed on a constant basis. And this isn't what I had thought it was going to be like. Someone promised me a vision of the future if I did everything right, that I was happy and successful, and it doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. This is why so many of us, this is my experience, we just keep adding more and more to our plate, right? It's like, wait a second, I'm not actually particularly happy, even though I've accomplished all the things. So maybe I just need to do more and more and more and have a bigger goal. And once I hit that next thing, that's actually probably where I'm going to find the happiness, right? And then we do it and we get to the next thing and it doesn't. And so we just add more and more to our plate. All of the relentless busyness, it distracts us enough that we don't really have to actually feel that we're not particularly happy. But if we ever take a time to pause or stop, we'll feel in our body the sense of just discontentment or unhappiness, or something is missing, something is wrong. And that's a hard pill to swallow, right? This is really hard stuff to think about. If the entire societal script that we've been sold, what we've been told our whole lives that will make us happy and is the key to success, actually doesn't make us happy or doesn't help us flourish as human beings. So many of us spend so much time. We build these huge careers. We build, all of these accomplishments and achievements and goals. And when you actually look at that and say, this isn't actually what makes me thrive as a human, that's hard. Like, we can honor that, right? We can sit with that, take a breath, take a minute. That is hard. That is not an easy thing to just accept. And there's also not a particularly easy solution. But there are things that you can do. I have begun playing with them myself for the last few years and will say I have had success with them, and I've seen other people do this as well. So I think the key thing here is reimagining success from maximizing for productivity, accomplishment, achievement, wealth, influence to maximizing for the key markers of human flourishing and intrinsic motivation. How can you maximize for deep human connection, mental and physical health? How can you maximize for joy and happiness, for growth, mastery, or following your passion, for impact, being aligned with your values? How can you maximize for having the freedom to do the work that you want to do, the things that actually matter? Can you flip the script for yourself so that you begin making decisions about your career and what you're doing based on maximizing for what matters, not maximizing for productivity? When done, you can begin to make different decisions in your life. So let me show you how this has worked for me in a few key areas. So we'll go back to the COVID story. I've left my company during COVID. They close the magazine, then they end up closing the business entirely. And I felt like such a tremendous failure during this time. I felt like I had wasted, quote, wasted 6 years of my life and didn't have anything to show for it. I hadn't been successful because this thing hadn't made heaps of money. I guess I needed it to exist into perpetuity forever. And because it hadn't, it had failed, right? There's a part of me that needed some closure around this chapter of my life. So I organized a call with many of my former teammates and employees at Conscious Company Media. We all met during COVID on Zoom all around the country. There's probably 10 of us there. And I just asked the simple question, what were your favorite memories from our time working together, building this crazy company that we did? This call went on for probably over 2 hours, and it was story after story of people talking about the relationships that they'd built between each other as team members, but also with people they'd met through the work, or some major impact we'd had as a result of an article that we ran or an event that we did, or someone coming up to someone at an event saying, because I read this article, I changed an entire way that I do my management. Or it was about things that people had learned. One of my colleagues, Rachel, she was the editor-in-chief of the magazine for a while. She was so excited about learning about the company Asana. They have this conscious leadership culture, and she ended up going and visiting, spending a day with them. Justin Rosenstein, who's one of the co-founders, diving deep into their culture, which helped her meet the people at the Conscious Leadership Group. And that has been an entire new chapter in her life of working with the Conscious Leadership Group. And she just talked to me about the way in which her own knowledge and the way that she's grown and evolved as a human as a result of this one story that she had done. And everything was about people, connections, meaningful experiences, growth, knowledge, mastery, passion, purpose. It was all of the elements of human flourishing and intrinsic motivation. I left the call feeling so much better about what I had done. And I said something to my husband like, maybe it wasn't a total failure. Maybe we succeeded in some way. And only later, once I learned these key elements, did I realize how incredibly successful this teeny little magazine that turned into a media company was for me personally and for the people who worked with it. For me personally, I mean, 6 years of running a company, the amount of things that I learned, it was like a PhD in business. There's so much around the business side of things, but also around leadership and culture. And also I grew and developed as a human, just my own personal abilities to communicate and listen and give people feedback, and the ways in which I was challenged and pushed. I evolved so much as a human being as a result of doing this. I learned so much. I built deep connections with the people who I worked with, but also I met so many people as a result of this work who I still to this day call some of my closest friends, people who've inspired me, made me think new things. I've had experiences that I never would have imagined in a million years. I got to interview Eileen Fisher. She was on the cover of issue number 3 of Conscious Company magazine. And I got to go to her house in Irvington, New York. and literally ring the doorbell and walk through these gorgeous curtains and sit down at her dining room table and have an hour-long conversation with her, which has led to a great relationship with her since. I got to take a float plane from Vancouver to a teeny island off the coast of Canada to give a keynote speech, gotten invited to do extraordinary things. The human experience that I've had, my life is so much more textured. It's so much more rich and valuable as a result of having done this thing that made a profound impact on so many people's lives. If I had gone into this thing with a new idea of success based around flourishing and intrinsic motivation, it quite literally checked almost all of the boxes, with the exception of my own mental and physical health and some of my social connections, as I overworked myself and disregarded family and friends while I was building the company. I got so wrapped up in everything. So I came out of this, did this research, and in 2022 was like, what if I reimagined my own personal definition of success rooted in what actually matters? This is something I would invite you to do as well. What are the things that matter to you most out of the elements of human flourishing and intrinsic motivation? And what would it look like if your idea of success and what you're shooting for was to maximize for those things? How healthy and well you are, how happy and joyful you are, how much you're being able to learn and grow and develop, how passionate you are about what you're doing, how impactful you are, how much you feel aligned with your values, how free you are to explore opportunities or work where you want or work with who you want on what you want. These are the elements that are actually going to make us happy, right? And so I reimagined success. Very specifically, mine is a lot around autonomy is a really big one for me. Freedom to work on what I want, with who I want, where I want, when I want. Flexibility to stop every work day at 3:30, work from home, minimize my travel. I have 2 young kids. I don't want to be away from them too much. I identified key sources of stress in my life from work and actively choose not to participate in those things anymore. Do I have time and space for supporting my mental and physical health? All of these things start building this new idea of success for me. Then I started to put it into practice in big and small ways. Very shortly after I'd had this epiphany about my new idea of success, I got headhunted for a pretty significant role. Well-known organization, CEO title, huge pay increase, access to tons of influential leaders. I was so honored to be headhunted for this role, and my ego felt fantastic. This role 100% made high achiever Meghan very happy. It was definitely my old idea of success, but new idea of success, Meghan, it did not align with that, with the exception of it would have been challenging. It would have helped me grow. I would have learned new things and had new experiences, but quality of lifestyle, zero autonomy. I would have been overly stressed, tons of high pressure, traveling all the time, away from my kids, didn't have the option to work from home, didn't have the option to stop when I wanted. There was so many other considerations that made it so I could no longer maximize for the way in which I feel like I flourish as a human, that I had to say no. And I felt very good about saying no, especially when I realized that I only was considering the role because of my ego, because it was the next higher step on the linear progression toward high achievement success that I had in my head. So this also comes into play with kind of smaller day-to-day stuff. My delightful mentee, her name is Maddie. She will come up many times, I'm sure, because she is incredible. I adore her. We do a monthly session, and she was talking to me about how she's been in the high achiever cycle her whole life. She calls herself a baby adult at the age of 24. She's just graduated from Johns Hopkins. She's working for a women's leadership organization. And she said everything in her entire life is all about building her college resume, making sure she gets into the best schools so she can get the best job, the whole societal script that so many of us are conditioned around. And she said now that she's adulting, she just has her full-time work. She's like, the other night I watched a few hours of Ted Lasso, and I got to the end of it and I felt terrible about myself. I felt so guilty for watching Ted Lasso. And I was like, oh, girl, Maddie, I hear you. I just had the same experience. Last month I went to Austin with my 3 besties from college. All of us work. All of us have kids under the age of 7. We have a lot of stress in our lives. And we went for 3 days just to reconnect, see each other. None of us live in the same town. And day one, I was doing okay. Day two, we're sitting by the pool, very relaxed, having a little snicky snacks, chit-chatting, catching up on life, just having a delightful day. And about every hour, my nervous system just ramps up to 11 and is like, oh, like something is wrong. This is what we're doing right now is not okay. Must feel guilt. I am not producing. I'm not with my kids. I'm not taking care of something. I'm not doing something. I'm looking at my phone, like waiting for some notification to come through that like someone needs me. I'm just racked with guilt for taking a day, a single day off to enjoy being with my friends. So around like hour 5 of this pervasive, wonderful guilt riddling my entire nervous system, I took a breath and was like, wait a second, stop. High achiever Megan, I see you. I love you. I have compassion for you. Thank you for all you've brought to me in my life. And new idea of success. If we are maximizing for things that make me joyful and deep human connection, I am in fact crushing it at those things right now. And this means I'm being entirely successful. I'm 100% maximizing for the things that actually matter to life right now, sitting by this pool. Goodbye, guilt. A thank you and goodbye. So I offered this to Maddie, was like, what if, just hear me out, Ted Lasso, does it make you happy to watch that show? And she was like, yes, I love the show. It makes me feel good. And I was like, what if that's your idea of success? Your career, the way in which that you're working right now, and the life that you're building allow you the time and space for things that bring you joy. For example, Ted Lasso. That takes the guilt off, takes the pressure off. All of a sudden, we're looking at these things, the things that actually matter, and we don't have to negate them or make them secondary or make them feel like something that we shouldn't be doing. We can prioritize them as the things that we actually want to and should be doing to maximize our success. Bringing this into the day-to-day, one of the best practices to actually root yourself into this new definition of success is a regular check-in, weekly check-in. My friend Nell Derek Debevos Dewey, Nell 3D as she calls herself, has a spreadsheet she uses at the end of the week. I use a little journal, and you simply touch base on what the week looked when you oriented it around the key markers of human flourishing and intrinsic motivation, the things that actually matter to you. How happy or joyful did I feel? How did I support my mental and physical health? Did I feel deep social connection this week? Did I grow, learn, or develop? Did I gain any new knowledge this week? Did I make a positive impact or feel aligned with my values? Did I have the freedom to work on what I wanted this week? All of those things, you could do a 1 to 10. You could write out, here's a way in which I felt super aligned with this week, and here's a way I fell short. Whatever resonates most with you, the key issue is consistency. Every week, at the end of the week, touch base on those things. When I started doing this, I started realizing the areas in which I was woefully deficient. I never made time for my mental and physical health. It's like always on the should list and never on the actual do list, because it felt like something that I needed to do to like check it off a box, like something I should do. When I started looking at it as something that actually helps me flourish as a human, that makes me happier, that makes me feel good, it all of a sudden became something I prioritized. So at the end of the week, how can you check in with each of the things that matter to you? And so I would recommend taking some time to write down a different definition of success rooted in flourishing and intrinsic motivation, and checking in with those key elements at the end of every week to make sure that you're staying on track. That's for today. So appreciate your time and the fact that you're a part of this community and that you're listening to all these ideas that come out of my brain. Hopefully I'll see you next week. Thanks again for listening to Better Than This. As a reminder, you can always find show notes and any corresponding resources for the show on the show's website at meghanfrenchdunbar.com/better better than this. And if today's episode resonated with you, I would be very grateful if you could leave a review or a rating on whichever podcast platform you're listening to the show on, or share the episode with a friend who you think would appreciate it. You can also subscribe to my Stack for weekly insights and tools to support your growth along the way. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo so we can, wait for it, build something better than this. Take care.